Members, you have 20 minutes.
I move I'll be sharing with my colleagues, Deputy Lisa Chambers, Fiona O'Loughlin, John Curran and Margaret Murphy O'Mahony.
Good.
Thanks, Count Corla. I wish we weren't here today, Minister. I wish my party hadn't been compelled to bring today's motion regarding the Defence Forces. I would much prefer if there was no retention crisis. I wish our men and women weren't leaving the Defence Forces in their droves en masse, heading for the exit doors as quick as they can. I wish the measures you and the government have belatedly introduced to stem the flood weren't the abject failure they have been. I wish morale among our serving men and women was sky high and not on the floor. I wish our naval vessels had enough staff so they could go out to sea and stop the huge quantities of drugs being trafficked into the country. I wish pilots and highly skilled personnel in our Air Corps weren't leaving faster than we can count. I wish our Army didn't have to wake up at all hours of the morning and drive hundreds of miles to get to work because of the disastrous reorganisation and the removal of the 4th Western Brigade and the displacement of so many personnel in the Midlands and west of the country. Commuters in perpetuity is all this has created. I wish I wasn't receiving messages from desperate families of the Defence Forces on a daily basis, how they are worried about the bills that they're coming through the door that they can't pay and aren't going away, the threatened evictions, the devastating impact all this has on their mental health and well-being. I wish no Defence Forces families were dependent on social welfare payments for supports. I wish the men and women of Óglaigh na hÉireann and our reserve Defence Forces were treated with the respect and dignity they deserve, with decent pay and proper working conditions. It's 2019, Minister, and the Defence Forces is at a breaking point. Of course, none of this is news to you. We implored to you to take decisive action before these problems have blown out of control. It's a real shame you didn't heed our warnings, Minister. We warned you in May of last year we could not recruit our way out of this retention crisis and that a credible retention policy was required. But what did you tell me on that occasion? You told me there was no full-blown retention crisis in the Defence Forces and that everything would be all right. Like the ostrich with his head in the sand, hoping everything will sort itself out. It hasn't. I raised the retention crisis again in November, and again you assured me you were confident that recruitment would get us to the white paper target of 9,500 serving members. Well, since then, Minister, we're actually further away from the 9,500. So please don't pretend any longer that this is a problem you have a grip on. You couldn't be accused of misleading the House because no one here would believe you. Your ineptitude, disinterest and inability to resolve this is unfortunately clear for us all to see. You are the silent lamb at the Cabinet table. We know the crisis we are in. Here are the facts, Minister. 3,200 personnel left the Defence Forces between 2014 and 2018, many highly skilled and well-trained at a great expense to the state. 82% of those were premature voluntary retirements. There were 327 discharges in the first 5 months of 2019, including 71 in May just gone. And of these 71, 14 were recruits. We had 86 discharged in April just gone, an unprecedented tsunami-like exodus under your watch. Turnover is at 9% and 14% for the Naval Service, a figure the Chief of Staff has said is crippling as we are now struggling to fill key leadership positions and overseas missions are at risk. This is also having a huge knock-on impact, with members now having to double and treble jobs so many areas of the Defence Forces can just manage. They're at breaking point. It's beyond time you actually listened to the concerns of the men and women of our Defence Forces. Because right now, the Defence Forces is serving on their goodwill, their devout loyalty, their dedication to the Irish state. These are the people who go out in the snow and clear the roads so the country doesn't come to a standstill in bad weather. So Gardaí and ambulances and the fire service can attend the scenes of emergencies. To the Defence Forces who stood last week in the fields and slept in ditches so the visit of the US President passed off without a hitch. where Gardaí earned many multitudes of Defence Forces members, despite standing beside each other in the wind and the rain, all in the service of the state. They're not even getting the minimum wage when you calculate the duty allowance and the work they do. Does that sound fair to you as a Minister for Defence? The Taoiseach says he represents the people who get up early in the morning. Well, the Defence Forces haven't gone to bed. What do they get? I wonder, do you highlight the fact that our Defence Forces are disintegrating at home when you are swanning around the world and you're using them as a prop, such as your visit to New York trying to secure a place in the UN Security Council? They feel totally demoralised by those international actions when you're treating them with such disrespect at home. I suspect not. But don't take my word for it. Listen to the concerns of PD Fora, RACO and the wives and partners of Defence Forces members, some who are here today, and who've been tireless in highlighting these problems for years now. Or take a look at the University of Limerick climate survey, where Defence Forces members have told of the chaos across the Army, Navy and the Air Corps. Or listen to Cathal Berry, who left the Defence Forces after a stellar career because he felt he just couldn't stand by and watch helplessly as it all fell apart around him. Or if you don't want to listen to any of them, listen to your own Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral Mark Mellett, who in an unprecedented move for someone in his position felt the need to intervene in the Public Pay Commission and make a personal plea for his staff to be treated with the respect and dignity they deserve. Of course, the entire Public Pay Commission process has serious question marks over it. This was supposed to be an independent process. On the 3rd of October, you told me a joint submission had gone from your department and the Defence Forces military management to the Pay Commission. But then you had to correct the record. On the 17th of January of this year, again in an oral response, you revealed the submission had not in fact gone to the Pay Commission, but was being held by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. This is deeply troubling. There's been a clear contamination, dilution and butchering of the recommendations from military management. The entire process and independence of the Commission has been compromised as a result. The leaked snippets I've seen are miserly, Scrooge-like increases in allowances that will be insufficient to stem the flow. In fact, they will promote an unprecedented exodus from the Defence Forces, an Armageddon scenario where so many decent, hard-working men and women are forced to the cliff edge. It is not an exaggeration to say the future of the Defence Forces is at stake here. The obvious move to rectify this situation is staring you in the face. This is the restoration and increase of military allowances to pre-FEMPI levels, as was in the submission for military management. You and Minister Donoghue say we cannot afford such measures. To you I say that we cannot afford not to have a Defence Forces. To Minister Donoghue I say he is penny wise and pound foolish. Prudent Pascal is now dangerous Donoghue. Minister Donoghue revealed his true colours yesterday when he tried to blame the men and women of the Defence Forces, literally the worst paid public sector workers, for his own failure to properly manage public expenditure. Fianna Fáil didn't write the IFAC report, which outlined his mismanagement of the public finances. Minister Donoghue needs to be reminded it wasn't the Defence Forces who overspent the $2 billion on the National Children's Hospital. He did. It wasn't the Defence Forces who will lose $3 billion on a national broadband network we won't even own. It was him. It wasn't the Defence Forces who blew the health budget or lost control of agency spending year on year. It wasn't the Defence Forces proposing a $3 billion tax cut in a reckless electioneering exercise. This was a shameful attack by a clearly rattled minister who tried to use the lowest paid in the public sector as a political pawn to attack Fianna Fáil. He should be ashamed and embarrassed. He repays the unwavering loyalty and absolute commitment with the Defence Forces with the exploitation of the worst paid workers. However, the increase in allowances can be managed within Vote 36. Military management has calculated that the allowances can be done at a cost of less than $30 million per year. So these are actually less than the amount you are returning to the Exchequer every year, as you outlined in a parliamentary question to me. Today's motion also includes a number of other cost-neutral measures which would go a long way to securing the future of the Defence Forces. We need a review of the Permanent Defence Force and the creation of an independent pay review body, as is in the UK. We're calling for much-needed military expertise in the Department of Defence, with greater military management input into spending and decision-making. We're calling for a specific retention policy so we keep our highly skilled people and stop losing vital corporate knowledge. Introducing a superannuation pension scheme for post-2013 entrants would also ensure personnel wouldn't feel the need to walk away to ensure they have a pension. There's also the Working Time Directive. We need a root and branch review of defence policy, the Defence Forces and the Department of Defence. We should be immensely proud of the work that the Defence Forces do and their peacekeeping duties abroad, but we should honour their commitment and dedication with loyalty. Stop disrespecting them. Get your head out of the stand. Stand up and fight for our serving men and women and show them a shred of the loyalty they show us every single day. I will now pass on to my colleague.